A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. You know, Herman, I was looking at some of those AI leaderboards yesterday, and it hit me. We've reached this weird point where every new model that drops claims to be the world's most intelligent, but then you actually use it to, say, schedule a calendar invite or find a specific line in a 100-page PDF and it just falls over. It's like hiring a genius who can solve third-order differential equations, but can't remember where they parked their car.
It is the great disconnect of our current era, Corn. We have these massive, multi-billion parameter engines, and we're still trying to measure their soul, as we've talked about before, using tests that were designed for a much simpler time. Today's prompt from Daniel is actually perfect for this because it points us toward EvalScope. It's an open-source evaluation toolkit from the ModelScope team, and it's essentially trying to build a much bigger, much more diverse yardstick for these models.
EvalScope. I like the name. It sounds like a medical instrument you'd use to check if an LLM is actually healthy or just faking it with some clever training data. And by the way, for everyone listening, a quick bit of meta context. Today's script is being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash, so if we sound particularly sharp today, you know who to thank. Or blame if I make a bad joke.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I have been diving into the EvalScope repository all morning. What's fascinating about it isn't just that it's another benchmarking tool. We have plenty of those. It's the philosophy. It's built as a one-stop orchestrator. Instead of trying to replace everything else, it integrates backends like OpenCompass and VLM EvalKit into a single framework. It's trying to solve the fragmentation problem in AI evaluation.
Right, because right now, if you're a developer and you want to test a model, you have to go to 5 different GitHub repos, set up 5 different environments, and then try to manually normalize the scores. It's a mess. So EvalScope is basically saying, give us the model, and we'll run the gauntlet for you. But what's actually in this gauntlet? Daniel mentioned the needle in a haystack test, which sounds like something I'd fail on a Monday morning.
The needle in a haystack test is arguably one of the most important benchmarks for the long context era we're living in. As these models move from a context window of 8,000 tokens to 1 million or more, the question isn't just, can the model fit this much text in memory? The real question is, can it actually find the information once it's in there?
It's the difference between having a massive library and actually having a librarian who knows where the books are. I've seen those heat maps for these tests. They look like a game of Minesweeper, where everything is green except for a few terrifying red squares in the middle.
Well, not exactly, but you've hit the nail on the head regarding the visualization. EvalScope has this baked right in. It tests retrieval accuracy by hiding a specific fact, the needle at various depths within a massive document, the haystack. It doesn't just give you a single percentage score. It generates a 2-dimensional grid. One axis is the document length, and the other is the depth of the needle.
So you can literally see if the model is forgetting things at the beginning of the document, or if it loses the thread right in the middle.
Precisely. Most models suffer from what researchers call the lost in the middle phenomenon. They are very good at remembering the first few paragraphs and the very last few, but the stuff buried at the 40% mark? That often just vanishes into the latent space. EvalScope automates this entire stress test. It supports context lengths from 1,000 all the way up to 32,000 tokens and beyond, and it provides that red to green heat map automatically.
That seems vital for anyone building RAG systems. Retrieval augmented generation. If I'm feeding a model my entire company's documentation, I need to know if it's actually reading the middle of the manual or just skimming the table of contents and the index.
And what's cool about EvalScope's implementation is that it's bilingual. It supports English and Chinese corpora, which is a huge deal given how much of the frontier research is happening in both languages. But the needle in a haystack is just one wing of the library. When you look at their full LLM benchmark index, the breadth is honestly staggering. They have over 100 benchmarks supported.
100? I can barely name 10. We've got MMLU for general knowledge, GSM 8K for math, Human Evil for code. What else are they stuffing in there? Is there a benchmark for how much sass can this AI give me before I get annoyed?
Not yet, though I'm sure someone is working on SassBench. But look at the categories EvalScope covers. They have the standard reasoning and math section, sure. They've added AIM 2024 through 2026, which are high-level math competition problems. But then they move into agentic and tool use. This is where it gets real, Corn. They've integrated the Berkeley function calling leaderboard and toolbench.
Tool use is the big transition right now, isn't it? Moving from a chatbot that tells you how to book a flight to an agent that actually opens a browser, finds the flight, and hits purchase. How do you even benchmark that consistently?
It's about evaluating the model's ability to generate the correct API calls. If the model is supposed to call a weather API, did it format the JSON correctly? Did it provide the right latitude and longitude? EvalScope runs these tests to see if the model can actually follow the rules of an external system. They even have something called Terminal Bench 2.0, which evaluates how well a model can operate in a real-world terminal environment.
That sounds dangerous. Step 1, delete root directory. Step 2, oops.
Well, that's why we use benchmarks instead of just letting them loose on our laptops. But think about why this diversity matters. If you only test on MMLU, which is mostly multiple choice questions about history and science, you might end up with a model that is a trivia king, but an agentic peasant. It can tell you when the Magna Carta was signed, but it can't figure out how to use a Python library to scrape a website.
It's the overfitting problem. We know these models are being trained on the test sets of the popular benchmarks. It's like a student who memorizes the answers to the practice exam, but doesn't actually understand the subject. If I'm a model developer, I'm gonna make sure my model crushes MMLU because that's what gets the headlines.
And that's why EvalScope is so important. By providing this massive, diverse library, they make it harder to cheat the system. You might overfit for 1 or 2 benchmarks, but are you going to overfit for 100? Are you going to overfit for HalloEval, which specifically tests for hallucinations? Or iQuiz, which tries to measure emotional intelligence and IQ?
Wait, iQuiz? We're actually trying to give these things an EQ score now? I can see the LinkedIn posts already. My AI has a higher EQ than my boss, which, to be fair, is a low bar for some of us.
It's a fascinating area of research. They're trying to see if the model can identify subtle social cues or emotional states in text. But beyond the vibe, tests EvalScope also dives into performance stress testing. This is something I haven't seen in many other open source kits. They don't just measure is it right, they measure is it fast.
Ah, the plumbing of AI. Time to first token and time per output token.
If you're deploying a model using something like VLLM, EvalScope can run a stress test to see how the performance degrades as you add more concurrent users. It's measuring the latency and throughput. Because in the real world, a model that takes 30 seconds to start talking is useless, even if it's the smartest model in the world.
I love that they're bringing that engineering rigor to the evaluation side. It's not just about the brain, it's about the nervous system. How quickly can the signal get from the prompt to the user?
And they've added this arena mode, which I find particularly interesting. It's inspired by things like the LMSYS chatbot arena, where you have 2 models, battle it out, and a judge decides which answer is better. EvalScope lets you run these pairwise battles locally. You can use a stronger model, like a GPT-4 class model, to judge the outputs of 2 smaller models you're trying to choose between.
The LLM as a judge approach. We've talked about the snake eating its tail aspect of that before. If the judge has the same biases as the models it's judging, are we actually learning anything?
It's a valid concern, but when you're dealing with thousands of open-ended prompts, you simply can't hire enough humans to read them all. EvalScope provides the framework to automate that comparison, which gives you a win rate rather than just a static score. It feels more real than a multiple choice test.
So, if I'm building a specialized coding assistant for, say, a very niche language like Haskell, I could use EvalScope to pull in Human Evil, maybe some custom Haskell snippets I've written, and then run a battle between 3 different fine-tuned models to see which one actually writes code that doesn't make me want to cry.
That's the perfect use case. And because it's open source, you can see exactly how the evaluation is being done. There's no black box leaderboard where you don't know the prompts or the grading criteria. Transparent evaluation is the only way we're going to get past this benchmark saturation phase.
Let's talk about that saturation for a second, because I feel like every time a new model comes out, people on Twitter, or X, whatever we're calling it this week, immediately start poking holes in the scores. Oh, this model just memorized the GSM 8K dataset. How does EvalScope actually help a developer know if a model is genuinely better or just better at the test?
One way is through customization. EvalScope makes it easy to plug in your own private datasets. If you have a set of 500 golden prompts that represent your specific business use case, maybe it's summarizing legal contracts or writing marketing copy in a very specific voice, you can run those through the EvalScope framework just as easily as you run a public benchmark.
That's the private leaderboard idea. Every company should have one. Don't tell me what the model got on MMLU. Tell me what it got on the Can It Understand Our Weird Internal Acronyms test.
Precisely. And they've even added this agent skill integration recently. This is a bit recursive, but you can actually use natural language to trigger these evaluations. You can tell the system, evaluate Quen 2.5 on GSM 8K, and it will generate the necessary command line arguments and start the process. It's evaluation for the lazy expert.
My favorite kind of expert. Hey AI, go tell me how good you are at math. And don't lie to me.
What I find really compelling is how they're addressing the reasoning efficiency question. With the rise of models like DeepSeek R1 that do thinking before they output an answer, we need new ways to measure if that thinking is actually productive. Is the model just overthinking and wasting compute, or is it actually working through the problem? EvalScope is starting to integrate benchmarks that look at that specific trade-off.
That's a huge point. If a model thinks for 10 seconds but gives me the same answer it would have given in 1 second, that's 9 seconds of wasted GPU time. And in 2026, GPU time is basically the new oil. We need to know if the thinking is actually reasoning, or just a very expensive boss.
It's the cognitive overhead of the model, and EvalScope's breadth helps you see where that overhead pays off. Maybe it doesn't help with trivia, but it's the difference between success and failure in SWE Bench, which is that benchmark for solving real GitHub issues.
SWE Bench is the one that actually makes models sweat, right? It's not just write a function, it's here is a repo with a bug, go find it, fix it, and make sure the tests pass.
It's incredibly difficult. Even the best models often score in the 15 to 20% range, but that's a real metric. If a model can improve its SWE bench score, that translates directly to developer productivity. EvalScope, including these high-stakes agentic benchmarks, shows they're focused on the future of AI, not just the chatbot pass.
So we've got this massive library, we've got the stress testing, we've got the needle in a haystack heat maps. If you're a developer listening to this, what's the first thing you do with EvalScope? Do you just clone the repo and run everything? Because that sounds like a good way to run up a very large bill.
You have to be strategic. The first step is to identify the failure modes of your current model. If your users are complaining that the model is hallucinating facts about your product, you go straight to the HoloEval benchmarks and your own custom truthfulness set. If you're building a long context app, you run that needle in a haystack heat map to find the safe zone for your prompts.
I think the most actionable takeaway is to stop trusting the vibe check. We've all been there. You send 3 prompts to a new model, it gives you 3 good answers, and you think, this is it, this is the one. Then you deploy it, and at scale it starts failing in ways you never imagined. EvalScope is the antidote to vibes-based development.
It's about moving toward a model evaluation lifecycle. You don't just evaluate once, you evaluate every time you change a system prompt, every time you swap out a re-ranker in your RAG pipeline, and every time a new base model is released. EvalScope gives you the infrastructure to make that a standard part of your CI/CD pipeline.
Continuous integration. Continuous evaluation. I like that. It's like having a standardized test that actually reflects the real world. Though I have to ask, Herman, as the resident expert on all things donkey-related and nerdy, do you think we will ever reach a perfect benchmark? Or are we just going to be in this arms race forever?
I don't think there is a perfect benchmark because intelligence isn't a single number. It's a multi-dimensional space. A model might be a 10 at coding, but a 2 at empathy, or a 9 at long context retrieval, but a 4 at logical reasoning. The goal of tools like EvalScope isn't to give us one final score, it's to give us a profile.
Like a character sheet in a role-playing game, this model has 18 strength in math, but only 5 charisma in creative writing.
You wouldn't use a warrior to do a wizard's job. By using a diverse set of benchmarks, you can see the stats of your model and decide if it's the right fit for the quest you're sending it on. And that's why benchmark diversity is so critical. If you only look at one stat, you're going to be surprised when the model gets into a situation it's not equipped for.
I think that's a great place to pivot to the practical side of this. If you're a developer, or even just an AI enthusiast, how do you actually start using this? Is it as simple as pip install EvalScope?
It almost is. You can install it via pip, and they have very clear documentation on how to run your first benchmark. If I were a listener, I would start by cloning the repo and running the needle in a haystack benchmark on a model you use every day. It's an eye-opening experience, pun intended, to see the heat map and realize that the model you thought was reading your 50-page documents is actually only paying attention to the first 5 pages and the conclusion.
It's the skimming realization. We've all been there. You ask a model about a detail on page 30, and it just gives you a generic answer based on the title. Seeing that red square on the heat map is the proof you need to start optimizing your chunking strategy or your prompt engineering.
And for the researchers out there, EvalScope is a great platform for contributing new benchmarks. If you've developed a new way to test, say, causal reasoning or temporal understanding, you can add it to the EvalScope library, and suddenly it's available to everyone using the framework. That's the power of open source. It's a force multiplier for the entire AI safety and evaluation community.
I also want to highlight the vision language aspect. We're seeing more and more models that can see, and EvalScope supports benchmarks like MathVista and MMMU. Evaluating how a model interprets a chart or a diagram is a whole different ballgame than evaluating text.
It's much harder because you have to account for spatial reasoning. Did the model see the trend line in the graph, or did it just read the legend? EvalScope integrates the VLM EvalKit backend to handle these multimodal tests. It's truly trying to be that one-stop shop Daniel mentioned.
It feels like the Swiss Army knife of evaluation. You might not need all 100 tools every day, but when you need that one specific hallucination detecting tweezers, you're glad it's there on the belt.
And as we move into 2027 and beyond, the models are only going to get more complex. We're going to see more mixture of experts models, more agentic workflows, more thinking models. The evaluation tools have to keep pace. I'm really impressed with how the ModelScope community is keeping EvalScope updated with the latest research, like those overthinking benchmarks we mentioned.
It's a lot to take in, but I think the core message is clear. If you're serious about building with AI, you have to be serious about measuring it. And you can't measure a hurricane with a thermometer. You need a full weather station. EvalScope is that weather station.
I love that. A full weather station for the storm of AI models hitting us every week. It gives you the pressure, the wind speed, the humidity, all the metrics you need to navigate safely.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. From needles in haystacks to iQuizzes and stress testing the plumbing of AI. It's a fascinating look into the workshops, where these models are being poked and prodded before they reach our screens.
It's what makes this field so exciting. We're not just building the engines, we're building the dynamometers to test them. And EvalScope is a world-class piece of equipment.
Before we wrap up, I want to give a huge thanks to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes. And of course, a big shout out to the team at Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this whole operation. Without them, we'd just be two brothers talking into a void, which, to be fair, we do anyway. But now people actually hear it.
It's a lot more fun when people are listening. If you found this deep dive into EvalScope useful, or if you've run your own needle in a haystack tests and want to share the results, we'd love to hear from you. You can find all our episodes and ways to subscribe at myweirdprompts.com.
And if you're feeling generous, leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. It really does help the algorithms find us, which is a bit ironic given what we just spent the last 25 minutes talking about.
The irony is not lost on me. This has been My Weird Prompts. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.
Later. Everyone, keep those haystacks small and your needles sharp. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow to